This is a typical Western teenager from the 90s. He plays basketball, is a fan of the Chicago Bulls, Air Max sneakers and Michael Jordan. He attends prestigious schools in Switzerland, visits Disneyland, speaks multiple languages, and enjoys all the achievements and values of Western civilization. His classmates know him as Pak Yu, and here he is, modest and educated, becoming the leader of a small country. He promises to improve the lives of ordinary people, organizes grand construction projects, and the world learns his real name, Kim Jong-un, and his actual accomplishments. He provides his country with reliable nuclear protection and secures unlimited power for himself, for which he is willing to do anything, dealing with his own uncle and any opposition, closing the borders like none of his predecessors, suppressing any information about the Western world where he essentially grew up and was educated. And today, North Korea is a territory of absolute secrecy. It's practically impossible to escape from there. But the paradox is that those who do still take pride in their homeland, even though they fear it and flee from it. Why does a country constantly under sanctions and sometimes struggling to feed its own population develop nuclear weapons? Why hasn't North Korea collapsed like the Soviet Union or regimes in Eastern Europe, but also hasn't embraced Western capitalists like China or Vietnam? And most importantly, how does Kim Jong-un manage to hold onto power with 25 million North Koreans no longer remembering a time when someone other than the Kim dynasty ruled their country? So, North Korea, or more accurately, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, has existed for 74 years. That's already 5 years longer than the Soviet Union lasted. But note this, in the USSR, there were 7 leaders in that time, and they kind of passed by each other more or less unnoticed. In North Korea, only 3 have been in charge during that period: Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and now Kim Jong-un. As you might guess from their last name, they're relatives, grandfather, father, and son. So it's clear from the start that North Korea is not about communism, not about the power of the people, and not even about party rule. It's a personal regime of a specific family, and somehow they have kept control of a multi-million population country for all these 75 years. How do they manage to do that? Rewinding exactly 70 years ago. Here, American planes, without sparing bombs, leveled the capital of North Korea, Pyongyang, to the ground.
900 tons of bombs rained down on a 20-square-mile area before the bombardier signals, mission accomplished. Elsewhere over Korea, Air Force and Navy fighters swooped down on Red troops and supplies.
Agreed. These figures, 900 tons over 20 square miles, are quite unclear whether it's a lot or a little. The correct answer is probably too much. Over these 3 years of the Korean War, specifically on Pyongyang, about 200,000 bombs will rain down, approximately 1 for each resident. And this not-so-young man, Curtis LeMay, commanding the US Air Force's strategic forces at the time, reports that his pilots burned down every house in North Korea. Later, he will complain to the leadership that he has run out of targets. So indeed, apart from homes, they also destroyed all the dams, flooded rivers, fields, and annihilated North Korean crops. And now, The viewers familiar with history will write, wait, Masha, North Korea attacked South Korea first. If it weren't for American forces, Kim Il-sung would have simply taken over the entire Korean peninsula with his army. And you are correct. Everything is as you say. And for those unfamiliar with the events, here is a very brief summary. After World War II, Korea was divided into two parts. In the north, there were communists, and in the south, pro-American comrades. On June 25, 1950, North Korean forces invaded the south. They captured about 90%, except for a small piece of land near the port of Busan. American forces, along with the UN, assisted their southerners, pushed into a counteroffensive and almost captured the north themselves, demolishing everything in their path with aviation. China and Soviet Union, not needing American imperialists nearby, joined the war on the side of North Korea. And by 1951, the war returns to where it started, the border drawn along the 38th parallel. In 1953, the parties finally tie out and sign an armistice. From that moment on until today, there are two countries on the map, North and South Korea. The latter have been actively supported by the United States, providing them with money, technology, and protection. Meanwhile, North Korea has been sustained by China and the Soviet Union. Until 1994, one man ruled the country, Kim Il-sung. But he turns himself from a leader during the wartime into the great leader, much like Stalin. Korean propaganda elevates him to the son of the nation, making him essentially the god of North Korea. How does he manage this? Remember how American planes burnt the entire country and its inhabitants literally hid underground from bombings. Agree, it can hardly be called a victory, but why not? Kim Il-sung does just that. On these ruins of his own capital, he holds a military parade and celebrates victory in the Fatherland Liberation War, which he started himself by attacking his neighbor. But no worries, the Soviet Union is ready to pay generous aid, and friendly communist countries will send experts, architects, consultants in all areas of public life to Korea. They rebuild North Korea, and it starts developing even faster than its southern neighbor. The authority of Kim Il-sung grows. And what's important is that this exemplary urban socialist paradise emerges in a country where, not so long ago, 80% of the population were peasants. Of course, they are surprised and delighted. And what is essential, under their patriotic noise, Kim Il-sung deals with any opposition, forms his cult of personality, the cult of the father of the nation. And here is the key moment that propaganda in any country has always used with great pleasure: caring for children. So that you understand, during the Korean War, Pyongyang will lose about 1 million people. That's a lot. And when your population is only 10 million, that's a whole lot. Can you imagine how many orphaned children remain?
Kids are the ones who always suffer most. They never know what's going on or why. And how can you explain to them after they've just seen their whole family get killed?
What does Kim Il-sung do? He orders to construction of children's homes and schools for the children who sacrificed for the homeland. They are raised with the belief that now Kim is their father. A vivid example is the Kim Revolutionary School for Orphan Children. It was opened in the place where Kim Il-sung was born, and its graduates will become the future elite of the armed forces and the state security service. In other words, the leader strategically cultivates those on whom he will rely. And now take a closer look at these propaganda paintings, mosaics, statues. Kim Il-sung seems to be not only a father, but also a loving mother in them. See how tenderly he presses children, wounded soldiers, peasants, and the elderly to his ample chest. This is not accidental. These values underline any religion, cult, or sect. It tries to replace the family. Do you think it's a coincidence? Or did I make it up? Well, look. Kim Il-sung's father was a school teacher, and his mother was the daughter of a school principal. They were also active followers of Christianity in East Korea, right? Detail number 2. Kim Il-sung idolized Joseph Stalin. And do you know who he learned from when he was young? A priest. And what did he do later? He established a blatantly religious cult of personality in a godless country named after himself. Both gentlemen clearly understand what they are building. And I want to hint you what kind of mess this ideal dictatorship consists of. Well, let's continue to figure out why the state tries to replace the family. What is the family? Care. Kim Il-sung cares about everyone. But a family is also security. And here comes the theme of nuclear weapons, or rather, the desire to obtain them. And again, we go back to the brutal American bombings. You know that wasn't the worst case scenario. A harsher option from the US would have been to drop not hundreds of thousands of bombs on Pyongyang, but several nuclear warheads, as they did at the end of their World War II with Japan. You've probably heard of the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And here's how they looked after a single explosion.
The Commercial Museum was also within 2/10 of a mile of 0 point, and the garden wall facing the blast was bent inward by the push of the explosion.
What does Kim Il-sung do? He understands perfectly well that the Americans could do to him the same thing they did to Japan at any moment. Therefore, he sends his scientists for knowledge and training here, to the city of Dubna in the USSR, to the Joint Institute for Nuclear Research. In 1964, in North Korean Yongbyon, with the help of the USSR, they established their nuclear research center and even installed a Soviet reactor there. But that's not a bomb yet. And Moscow isn't exactly rushing to share technology, because 2 years earlier, in 1962, there was the Cuban Missile Crisis. What happened? Initially, the Americans deployed their nuclear missiles in Turkey, which the USSR didn't like, understandably, as it was too close to its own borders. In response, they deployed missiles in Cuba, and that didn't sit well with the United States. They blockaded the island, and for 2 weeks, the world was on the brink of a nuclear war between the USSR and the USA. But Presidents Kennedy and Khrushchev reached an agreement. The USSR removed its missiles from Cuba, in exchange for the United States removing its nuclear warheads from Turkey. The deal was made, the war didn't happen, everything was fine for everyone except North Korea. Because there you finally understand that the USSR, if it serves its own security interest, can easily betray an ally. So what do? You can't wait for help. You have to develop nuclear and any other weapons yourself. And please, the share of the national budget for the military-industrial complex in North Korea increases from a negligible 4.5% in 1956 to 30% in 1966. And what happens next? The saved people of North Korea begin to consider Kim almost literally a saint. He defended the country, won the war, united people, and after all fed them. There was hunger and disease, and now there are hospitals and clinics on every corner, at least in Pyongyang. But it won't be easy from here. The USSR collapses, China turns westward, aid diminishes, Kim Il-sung dies, and the terrible famine of the 1990s begins. But even under these circumstances, the Kims remain in power. How? Let's step aside for a moment. There are many myths about North Korea. Like people there still eat grass. So the more monstrous the lie, the easier it's to believe. And if you add those strange videos where people cry at the appearance of the leaders and applaud like robots, you start believing any nonsense about North Korea. But in reality, the Kim regime is very calculated. Otherwise, it wouldn't have lasted so long. Look, in the 1990s, when a terrible famine hits the country and most Koreans look something like this, you won't get support from the deceased USSR or partially capitalist China. As a result, the UN starts sending humanitarian aid to the country. And the main donors of this story are North Korea's main enemies, the USA and South Korea. But even that is not enough. The North Korean government is forced to loosen its grip and allows some form of private trade. Improvised markets emerge, smuggling thrives. State-owned factories stop, but the men still go to work because they have to, even though they don't even earn much. And they are wives becoming the main entrepreneurs. Because according to Korean traditions, they are supposed to stay at home, raise children, but since they need to save the children from hunger, they go out to trade, and the private business starts to grow. But growing too much is dangerous. The regime could collapse as it happened in the USSR, and here Kim Jong-il, the second Kim, makes a wise move. To maintain his power, he bets on the military and declares their Sonjun policy. The military comes first. There are two reasons for this. First, if these military guys live poorly, they'll be dissatisfied. And since they always have convincing arguments, weapons, they can overthrow the regime. There is a second reason. Kim Jong-il only comes to power after his father's death, and he needs to raise his own authority. The army doesn't particularly respect him. No, not because he wears high heels or looks strange. Kim Jong-il never had real military experience, just like his father had. Before becoming the national leader, he was involved in propaganda but not warfare. And to prevent the military from devouring him, it was crucial for him to grease the wheels of the military apparatus and give them more opportunities, increase their defense budget, prioritize the military when allocating subsidies for money or food, and for himself, Kim has a clear calculation. For example, why invest money in an expensive nuclear program? This way, he can avoid the fate of leaders like Gaddafi, the dictator of Libya. When a civil war broke out in the country, NATO forces intervened and Gaddafi was killed. So the moral of this fable is that without nuclear protection, you can be invaded and overthrown at any moment. Of course, today Kim Jong-un is not planning to be the first to launch nuclear weapons. That's suicide, so the American response will be 100%. But having missile stockpiles with nuclear warheads that can reach Washington is an argument to keep Washington from meddling in North Korea's affairs. As they say, there is no better defense than a hydrogen bomb and the means to deliver it. And the second argument, as always, is propaganda. Kim Jong-un now tells his people, look, we have become a strong and developed state under my leadership. We threaten the US. In general, there is a universal theory that any authority will maintain itself identically if it has three strong pillars. The first, it's liked by the common people. Well, for that, North Korea has propaganda that tells grand stories about great leaders, how North Korea is surrounded by enemies and leaders know how to protect it. The second pillar is the military, and it's crucial, the top military ranks. They must live well. And the Kims are not fools. Remember the figures on military expenditures, nuclear weapon development, and other poor military privileges. And the third pillar, big business must support the power. You might say, stop, this is North Korea, what business? Well, this one. Even under Kim Jong-il, when they had to loosen the screws, a new class of people emerged. Now they call them Tonju, money lords. Senior officials of the Labor Party or those military leaders, those who manage state-owned companies in Korea, or those who do business abroad. These are officials who try to attract investments in North Korea or earn foreign currency. Military officers and those married women who may not work for the state but, as it turns out, can engage in private trade. And today, all these guys have enough money to feel okay. And it's not about North Korea's won. These people earn and spend normal and friendly American dollars. You look at this and understand that Kim Jong-un is using the classical scheme described in Niccolo Machiavelli's books. Don't worry about the people as a whole. Attract a small group of chosen ones to your side. And roughly 1% of the population in North Korea lives very well. They drive normal cars, vacation at normal resorts within the country. Yes, the last Kim Jong-un built ski slopes, rice sports entertainments, and even Western clothes flowed into the country. If not like a river, then like a decent stream. And these guys stick to the Kim dynasty because it gives them everything. A concrete example is the automotive industry of North Korea. Yes, North Koreans try to make copies of various Western and Chinese cars. And imagine, you own such a factory, and your car sells more or less well, and you can make good money on it. And now imagine, this iron curtain collapses. What will happen to your factory? Will it compete with South Korean Hyundai, or the Chinese. Remind you what happened to the automotive industry after the collapse of the Soviet Union. So, for these people, the Kim regime is a guarantee of their comfortable lifestyle. And Kim needs them because they sponsor his regime. Here is an example. Everyone mocks the state company Air Koryo. It flies on old illusions and it's generally the world's worst one-star carrier with one flight per day. But inside the country, they own a taxi service, a network of gas stations, and a tourist agency. They produce cigarettes and canned goods under their own brand. And all of this is done with permission from above. A kind of private-state partnership where the government takes over the hassle of production, logistics, and sales, but still controls and takes a share of the money. And it takes a good share. But wait a moment. According to South Korean intelligence estimates, Kim Jong-un has 33 residences in North Korea. In 28 of them, there are railway stations, and the residences are surrounded by multiple fences connected by underground tunnels, and of course, there are bunkers where the leader can hide from any attack. And now, look at this video. In 2018, the well-known developer and the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump, shows it to him during a personal meeting. So the essence is as follows. So, Comrade Kim, we are ready to give you and your country all the opportunities of our investments and capitalism. We will invest so much money that your Pyongyang will become no worse than Miami. So do you want it to be like in China or Vietnam, where the Communist Party retains political power, but the economy is poorly on capitalist rails? Or let's do it like in Japan. There are the third largest economy in the world, we control them too, but they have a constitutional monarchy. So here is imperial, you'll be in a similar law. Just let's do it without these missiles, okay? An enticing offer. And most importantly, many agreed, even those with nuclear weapons. But Kim Jong-un already has all this luxury, and he understands perfectly well that the guarantees of his survival is that very nuclear weapon. Giving it up provides absolutely no guarantees. Multi-billion-dollar business sharks will devour him and his system within a few years. Kim Jong-un was born in 1982 and was already mature enough, 9 years old, to remember the collapse of the USSR and the communist regimes of Eastern Europe. Plus, he received education in Switzerland and knows Western values and dynamics from the inside. Remember, I mentioned that young Kim was a fan of basketball and the Chicago Bulls. Well, when he first came to the power, few in the States understood what to expect from a chubby guy with a strange hairstyle. In the Obama administration, they wanted to bridge the gap and organize basketball diplomacy. There was even an option to send Michael Jordan to North Korea, but he refused, claiming he was supposedly afraid of flying.
One of the most iconic images ever of Air Jordan.
Exactly. The person who would agree to all sorts of outrageous things is Dennis Rodman. Indeed, Dennis Rodman ended up making several trips to Pyongyang. Not only did he play basketball, but he also personally shared moments with Kim Jong-un. He even sent him birthday wishes.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
And in some ways, basketball diplomacy does help. The world sees that Americans are not getting shot on North Korean soil upon arrival, and North Koreans play basketball quite well. However, in reality, for both countries, it's just a PR show for their domestic audience. After a few rounds of the friendship chewing gum world between Kim and Rodman, it ends because there was exactly zero sincerity in it. Why would anyone need the leader of a country and the country itself, which ranks at the very bottom in all sorts of ratings? Is it so attractive? Kim Jong-un and his predecessors for themselves have done everything right to stay on the throne. They eliminated all rivals within the country, invented their ideology that works, acquired effective nuclear protection, and formed a circle of people who have a vested interest in keeping the Kims in power. And all of this aligns with the iconic phrase, "Let some get rich first." Exactly, do you know who said that? Deng Xiaoping, the Chinese leader we talked about in the previous episode on China. He initiated grand economic reforms, and essentially, thanks to him, China embarked on the path to becoming the world's leading economy. But the truth is, this phrase has a second part that many forget. Let some get rich first, but gradually everyone should become prosperous. However, the talent of the perfect dictator prevents this. You must constantly scare those with money that without him, without the ruler, they will become poor. As for those without money, you can't let them die of hunger, but you can't let them get rich either. Otherwise, they will learn too much about their rights to power.